Hi, my name's Horton and I'm an application engineer for our 3D dock team here at FARO UK. During this tutorial I'm going to talk you through the new features of Scene 5.5. I've split the tutorial into two parts. In part 1 we're going to focus on scene itself, and in part 2 we're going to focus on scene capture, scene process and the new Freestyle X product. So for those of you that have watched previous tutorials, you may recognise this set of scan data. It's Minster level in England and data is courtesy of English Heritage. The first new feature I'd like to look at is the ability to double click and fly to a point. In previous versions we could do something similar, but we first had to click the X key on the keyboard and then click on the location, and it would fly to that point. If I hit the backspace key, it will go back to my previous camera position. So now, without touching the keyboard, I literally double click and it will fly into that known point. Backspace again. We've also given the ability to cancel that command on the fly. If you've double clicked by accident, you can either use some of the keyboard commands for moving forward, back, left and right. So in other words, W, S, A, D, Q, E, R, F, I, J, K and L, which are all listed in the help menu, or what I can do is simply move my mouse. So as I double click, if I then click and move, and double click and move, you can see that it's cancelling the command. So as I'm starting to fly in, if I click and move, and it will stop the command. So we now have that ability to cancel that animation rather than having to fly in. Or we use the backspace key and it will toggle back through your camera positions as you've used. So that's the first new feature. On a similar theme, we've now modified some of the icons. So the old align camera position here, where we used to do it by 3 clicks, we can still do to align the camera to look from the top. Or if we click backspace, if we click the button now, we can align the camera by a single click and it will rotate the camera to look from the top. Or if you like keyboard shortcuts like myself, hit T on the keyboard and align the camera in that way. In addition to this now, we also have the ability to level a scan by a single click or by 3 points. So imagine the scenario, you've had an issue with your inclinometer or no inclinometer data was available. This could be by using the freestyle or the focus. On any scan now, if I look at it in a 3D view and zoom out, I now have the ability to level this scan just with a single click or 3 clicks. To do that, you just right click on the scan, go to Operations, Registration, and you now have level with 1 click or 3 clicks. So if we select 1 click and click on the grass there, I've effectively leveled that scan. You must be aware, however, in doing this after a registration, you could effectively modify the transformation of that single scan, thus causing errors with your registration and your scan manager. So think about it carefully before using it, but it's there as a backup in case you need to level a scan. Next, we've modified the way that the clipping box works. So at the moment I'm working in a project point cloud. I could be working in a scan point cloud, which you obviously need either or in order to create a clipping box. If I look from the top and I look at the building itself, then what I actually want to do out of the main body of the building is delete all the extremities. Now if we are in a project point cloud or a scan point cloud, we can obviously use the polygon tool for point clouds to delete the data, but it's a case of tracing around the area. I often used to use the clipping box to hide internal or external information when cleaning up the data. For instance, on this particular job there were a few people walking around, and when I cleaned it up to create a movie, I placed a clipping box over the top of a person and I would hide that person inside. Otherwise I'd have had to create a clipping box to then narrow the field of view around that person, to then use the polygon selector to then select that person and delete them. But now what we can do, if I place a clipping box over the top of the building, I use the manipulators to rotate, remembering that if you're too zoomed in, you can use the plus or minus symbol on your keyboard to narrow in the field of view for the manipulators. We get it almost level with the building, and then we pull in the sides So we just tight up to the wall there, and tight up to the wall there, and the same at the back and the front. So now, if I now right click on my clipping box, we have delete visible points of all active clipping boxes. That means anything visible on the screen inside the clipping box will be deleted, or we have delete invisible points of all active clipping boxes, which means anything outside of that clipping box will be deleted. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to delete all active points outside the clipping box. So the system will go away and delete those now. The beauty of it is I no longer need that clipping box. So if I delete the clipping box, and then all you'll see on the screen is just the data from within the clipping box. So everything else has disappeared. So I don't have to manage multiple clipping boxes. I can use them just to select an object and then delete it, which is great when you're in a confined area or when you're in a large space. You don't have to create a clipping box first to narrow down the field of view, to then use the polygon tools to select an object to then delete it. You use the clipping boxes, which makes things a lot easier and a lot cleaner. So just because I want to show other stuff, I've reverted my project back now, just to give me all the data. So now we've done some cleanup with regards to the export options. Prior to 5.5, if we wanted to export a copy of these scans as FLS files, we'd right click on the cluster and we'd have the save copy of scans, or save copy of scan. Now what we've got is to export the scan points. Under the pull down menu we now have the FLS option as well as all the others. So now we would select a group of scans or a single scan, and we can export that as an FLS file in the same way. In addition to this, in 5.4 we introduced the ability to save out the RCP file. So it meant that we bypassed the indexing process within Autodesk's recap. For those of you that have used it, you remember that the way to access it was under the export project icon up here. But now what we can do is right click, go to import export, export project, and we now have the RCP export on a right click. Prior to 5.5 we could only export the entire project. Now what we can do, if I cancel that, if I were to export on a subcluster, I would get the same option. So import export, export project, and I could export a single cluster as an RCP file. We can also now do that at scan level. So if I right click on a scan, go to import export, export as a project, select my RCP file, and that will now only export that one scan as its own RCP project, which gives us a lot more flexibility. So in summary on that point, everything now has been put in the same location. Simply right click, export your scan points, export your project, export your scan parameters. It's all under the import export dialog box. The next new feature is an enhancement to the way cloud to cloud works. Cloud to cloud was introduced in Scene 5.3, and for those of you that have used it, you may have realised that it works in a pairwise functionality. So for instance, it always considers a minimum amount of pairing. So over 5 scans we would have 4 pairs. But also you could get a cumulative error. So when registering scan 1 to 2, if you had a 10 mil error, that would then be carried forward to scan 2 to 3, where you might have a 2 mil error. So by the time you get to scan 3 to 4, you could in effect have a 12 mil error. The only way of tightening that down would have been to use targets, or to reduce the number of scans in a cluster, or to increase the amount of scans you've done by getting more overlap. In 5.5 now, what we've introduced is a bundle adjustment. So now it would work in the same way, in that we would consider pairs, scan 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on. But then the system automatically in the background will then go and look for alternate pairs. So it might find that scan 1 to 3 also has overlap. So it will start to look where it can reduce that error across multiple scans by doing multiple pairwise registrations. The bundle then is tightened down. Also in 5.4 we didn't consider the use of the inclinometer in the registration. The inclinometer is used for a top view, but it wasn't used for a cloud to cloud. Now in 5.5 we've added a weighted tension to the use of the inclinometer. So the inclinometer then, over a long run of scans, is helping to keep those scans level. So in effect, it's like adding a target into your registration whilst you're doing cloud to cloud. Again, it's all aimed at tightening down that registration. You've got multiple pairwise registrations taking place, as well as a consideration for the inclinometer. So what I've actually done on the screen here, I've gone ahead and done a registration. For those of you that have seen what I normally do, I do a top view and then I do a cloud to cloud. Looking at my scan results, my worst mean scan point tension is 7mm. So I've also gone and done that directly in 5.4. So if I look at the registration here, my worst mean scan point tension is 7.5. So straight away you can see the accuracy in 5.5 is better. However, one of the things that I've done here, if I go back to 5.5, go to my scan manager and look at my settings used, in the general tab I haven't used the inclinometer, and I've done that on purpose because I wanted to compare scene 5.5 with scene 5.4 directly, just to see whether the cloud to cloud has been improved by doing multiple pairwise registrations. So now what I can do, I'm going to revert the project back to a previous point where I had my registration with the inclinometer turned on. So having done that in the background, if I go to my use settings, I've still got my cloud to cloud registration, but this time under the general tab you can see quite clearly I've used the inclinometer. If I then go to my scan results, remember before, without using the inclinometer, I had a worst mean scan point tension of 7mm. Now using the inclinometer, you can see that we've got mean target values. So these are the error between the scan location and the inclinometer. So you can see there was 0.4 of a millimeter difference in scan MSN 001. But also, my mean scan point tension has come from 7mm down to 6.2. So the registration process has massively improved by using the multiple pairwise functionality and the software being given the ability to use the inclinometer data. Again, if you're doing a registration and you're getting bad values here, it might point you back to the fact that you have a poor inclinometer reading. So you do have that ability to go back and run the registration again. But overall, by allowing that bundle adjustment and that multiple pairwise functionality, the registration within cloud to cloud has become a lot better and a lot tighter. In addition to this, we're also considering loop closing as well. So if I go to look at my correspondence view over here, close that down, let's just flick to clear view mode just to make it a bit clearer, and we'll look at this from the top. Now what we've got here is you can see that the scans were started around this area, and actually we worked around the building. So we then got overlap between the scan locations. That again is going to aid the registration because it then can start to consider the end scans with the beginning scans. So that about covers the new features of scene 5.5. In the next tutorial, what I'm going to look at are some of the freestyle options for scene capture and scene process, along with the new Freestyle X. Thank you for watching. I hope it's been of use, and please feel free to look out for forthcoming movies.